YouTube. My name is Jack, and this is a video response to a video that Thorn Mooney posted just this morning. I'll link Thorn's video down below. I don't want to spend the entire time here recapping it, so you should go watch that before you watch this one. But Thorn shared a video this morning about the idea that witchcraft is in a spectrum, and really kind of the thrust of her video is that people mean different things when they use the word witchcraft, and that a lot of the miscommunication and arguments that happen, especially in online witch spaces surrounding legitimacy, what counts as witchcraft, what doesn't count, what counts as good witchcraft, those things often come from a place of people just having different goals and expectations for their own witchcraft practices, and then kind of projecting that outwards on everyone else, which is a super interesting conversation. And again, definitely check out Thorn's video. It made me think about some other things, and then also not too long ago I was having a conversation with Thorn and some other people about just missing the days when YouTube really felt like a conversation. So missing the days when the content that you found on witch YouTube was not so much educational or instructional as happens with a lot of YouTube right now, but instead was just kind of a series of VRs and people talking about their practice or their thoughts or things like that. So in that spirit, I'm gonna do a quick VR here and talk about a few different ways in which I think that our definitions of witchcraft can differ. Because as I was watching Thorn's video, I thought about really three different spectra that witchcraft falls on. And I think that understanding ourselves relative to those three spectra helps us to situate kind of relative to other people when we're having these conversations. So this is a spin-off, this is related to what Thorn was talking about. But I think of really three different axes of difference where my witchcraft might meaningfully differ from what someone else is doing. And the first of those axes is the amount of practical magic or spell casting that someone does. So there are people who are doing all spellcraft all the time, right? To them, to be a witch is to cast spells. And these are the people who are doing a spell every day, or, if not every day, then at the very least, every week they have some kind of new magical thing going on. They're doing home blessings, they're doing health spells, they're doing prosperity spells, they're, this, that, and the third. And then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have people who claim the word witch for any of a variety of reasons, but who are not particularly interested in practical magic. So maybe they're doing magic more for personal improvement. Maybe they're doing magic more for connecting with the gods, or maybe they're just claiming an aesthetic or an archetype, or sort of making a political statement, right? The word witch has been used by feminist groups basically throughout the 20th century. Because it is, in many ways, a word that is evocative of sort of subversive women's power, and there are people who want to claim that word, but who aren't necessarily interested in casting spells. And when I say casting spells, really I mean kind of any magic that is done in order to achieve a practical end. So something like acquiring a lover, getting a job, protecting your home, getting more money, anything like that. And there are lots of different means by which people can try to magically achieve that end. I'm not really focusing on the means here, just sort of practical magic that is trying to accomplish an end that has sort of a concrete result in the external world. So I think that's one axis of difference. The other two axes I kind of just hinted at. One is the extent to which your witchcraft focuses on personal development, personal growth, whether that is spiritual or psychological, or, So again, there are some people for whom witchcraft is all about becoming a better person. Witchcraft is all about self-empowerment and, healing old wounds and opening yourself up and, being able to live a healthy and meaningful life in connection with other people. There are some people for whom witchcraft really is oriented toward that. And there are other people, again, on the opposite end of the spectrum. This isn't binary, right? There are places in between, but there are other people for whom witchcraft has absolutely nothing to do with being an actualized person. And like, witchcraft is about having the power to like blow smoke in your enemy's eyes, and it doesn't really matter like whether you're trying to heal the trauma that you experienced at the hands of other people. Like, for some people, witchcraft is about power and not necessarily about personal growth or healing or anything like that. And then there are people who exist kind of in a whole range along that spectrum. And then the third axis of difference that I really see when I talk to other witches and when I'm trying to get a feel for where we stand relative to each other is the extent to which someone's witchcraft involves veneration. And here I mean veneration very broadly. That can be a relationship with deities, that can be a relationship with ancestors, that can be a relationship with spirits of the land, but the extent to which someone's witchcraft practice involves the veneration of non-living human spirits is, I think, a really meaningful distinction between different kinds of witchcraft, different kinds of things that people are trying to do with their witchcraft. So there are people who are hardcore on a veneration practice, whether that is with a deity or with some other kind of spirits. And then there are people for whom veneration is really not part of what witchcraft is. And they might have relationships with spirits, but those relationships might be pacts or agreements, so more like a business contract than like a relationship of veneration. Or those relationships might be relationships of command. So if someone has a servitor or a thought form or a fetch that they, command, depending on the nature of the relationship, maybe a familiar spirit, but a spirit that serves them rather than a spirit that they venerate. That's a very different kind of relationship. So this axis is not so much whether there are spirits involved in your practice, it's the extent to which you have a relationship of veneration with the spirits that are involved. Because I think that some people see witchcraft very much as this kind of reverent orientation toward, insert category of spirit here, the goddess or nature or, your ancestors, whatever. But like, there are people for whom witchcraft is really about that feeling of reverence and awe and sort of honoring something that is maybe greater than yourself that you exist in connection with. And then there are people for whom witchcraft is very much not about that, and for whom witchcraft is maybe more of a personal enterprise that is not about veneration, but is about the accomplishment of your own personal goals, where you might be in connection with other practitioners or with other spirits, but you're not venerating, you're not revering, you're not worshiping. And there are people for whom worship just simply isn't a part of their witchcraft and what they consider witchcraft to be. And so I think those are kind of the three main axes of difference that I see when I'm talking to other people about their witchcraft and kind of the fundamental assumptions about witchcraft that they have that might be different from my own. There are other possible sources of difference, right? Like, one big one is the extent to which your witchcraft is individualistic versus existing kind of in connection with other people, whether that's practicing with a group or being part of a tradition or whatever. But I think that in terms of just like how much are we speaking the same language when we talk about witchcraft, those three axes are really the big ones that I think of. And like, if I am talking to someone, even someone who isn't Wiccan, who isn't Gardnerian, who doesn't practice with a coven, but if they practice a witchcraft that looks similar to mine as far as spellcasting, personal improvement, and veneration go, then we're enough in the same world that we can have a really fruitful and meaningful conversation without having to take a step back and like define our terms. So there is an element here, like, as I talk about this, I'm hearing echoes of, here's a blast from the past, John Halstead's like 3 centers of paganism. For anyone who wasn't around during the Pathos Wars of 2013, there was a Pathos blogger named John Halstead who talked about, I think this was Halstead. Was this Beckett? John Halstead and John Beckett were in sort of an ongoing dispute with each other about the nature of paganism. And I think it was Halstead, but one of the two of them started talking about sort of three centers for paganism, three things that paganism can focus on. And he said that paganism can be deity-centered, it can be earth-centered, or it can be sort of psychologically self-centered. Halstead is an atheist who wanted to sort of, I think he's the one who coined the term atheo-paganism. John Beckett is very much a polytheist who feels that it doesn't really count as pagan, or felt, I don't know how he still feels, but felt that it doesn't really count as paganism if it's not theistic in some way. There's ships passing in the night, lots of people talking past each other and miscommunicating. But like, as I talk about these three axes of difference in witchcraft, right, like spellcasting, personal improvement, and veneration, I hear echoes of the like three centers of paganism thing, which like that's a whole, that was a bad time on the pagan internet, not really looking to reopen that conversation, but it would be intellectually dishonest of me not to nod to that. As far as my own practice goes, thinking about these three axes, and then I'll wrap this video up. Spellcasting, I'd probably sit myself at a 6 or a 7. Spellcasting is important. To me, it is an essential part of what it is to be a witch, and I make a point to cast spells regularly, because that is part of what I do as a witch. That is part of what it is to me to be a witch. And I don't think I would be able to call myself a witch if I weren't regularly practicing practical magic. At the same time, I don't need a lot, right? I have friends who will do magic just for the sake of doing magic. I have friends who will do magic to fuck around and find out, and they like want to conjure a demon and, you know, ask it to do X, Y, or Z for them, just to kind of see what it's like to conjure a demon. That's great. I admire that level of curiosity and experimentation and the love of doing magic just for the sake of doing magic. But that's not me. I do magic when I have a need, when there is a thing that I need to accomplish, and I do magic in order to accomplish it. I'm never going to do magic kind of just for the sake of doing magic. So for that reason, like, I'm really not at a 10 on the spellcasting scale. Certainly above a 5, but probably, like, yeah, somewhere around a 6 or 7. Spellcasting is important to me, it's a big part of my practice, but it also is only ever motivated by a perceived need for a particular practical outcome, rather than sort of, I want to do magic, let me find something to do magic for. So I'm not the person who is doing spells every single day. I'm not the person who has, like, a car blessing spell, and a home blessing spell, and a, you know, spell to make myself wake up in the morning, and, like, that's just not me. Axis number 2, like, personal improvement, very low for me. Very, very low in terms of what my witchcraft is. I'd say probably like a 3, maybe a 2. I care about self-improvement. I care about, like, working on my shit and, you know, taking ownership and accountability of the ways in which I need to grow as a person so that I can live kind of a healthy life in connection with the people around me. But that's not really so much a part of my witchcraft. I mean, it is and it isn't. I think that initiation provides opportunities for us to change our lives and to take ownership of our lives and to transform. The purpose of any initiatory ritual is to transform you, and you have to make choices to let it do that. But ultimately, I think that that's like work that I do outside of my witchcraft, right? Like, I'm not casting spells to heal traumas or open my heart or, you know, like, make myself a less arrogant person. Let's be real, that's never going to happen. But, like, like, my magic, my witchcraft is not focused on self-actualization. There is stuff that I do for self-actualization, but that's stuff that I do, like, you know, when I in conversations with a therapist, or like talking to my friends, or journaling. Like, that's not part of the witchcraft in my mind. I think the witchcraft can dovetail with that. I think the witchcraft can open doors and create opportunities for self-actualization, but to me, in the way that I think about my witchcraft, self-actualization is really not the point. I think about witchcraft as much more focused on those other two axes. And that brings us to the third axis, which is veneration, and I am like way up at the top on that one. Veneration is super important to me as part of my witchcraft. I am a Gardnerian Wiccan, so I am a priest of two particular gods. I take that commitment very seriously. But also, I have established relationships with the spirits of the land where I live, with the spirits of my home, with ancestral spirits, with certain other spirits of the dead who are not my ancestors. I have I have relationships of veneration with all of those. So much of my witchcraft is about being in connection with spirits who are other than and greater than myself, and feeling a sense of wonder and awe and humility before them. So, I'm at a 10 on the veneration scale. So, 6 or a 7 on spellcasting, 2 or a 3 on personal development, and then a full-on 10 for veneration. And that's kind of my witchcraft profile. Those are the places that I'm at and the assumptions that I make when I talk about witchcraft. And those are going to be very different than some other practitioners. But I think that being aware of those 3 axes of difference helps me to calibrate when I'm talking to other witches. And so this goes back to Thorn's original video, which again is linked below. I think it's just important for us to, when we have conversations with other people, be aware of the assumptions that we make and the assumptions that they're making, and how those assumptions are different from each other, so that we can find whatever common ground we have before we start talking. So, anyway, that is the end of this video. Thanks for watching. Let's bring back VR YouTube. Bye.